you ready?
Okay, it's time to call this meeting to order. Janet, would you go ahead and give the invocation?
Yes, I'll be glad to. Let us pray. Father, we just thank you for the many blessings that you bestow upon this city on a daily basis. We thank you, Father, for the beautiful weather that we have had these past few days. We ask, Father, that you be with each of us, giving us the knowledge to move forward with the tax purpose in mind, so that the citizens of this city can be served in the way they should be. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Okay, let's go ahead and stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go down to number one, discuss and consider. Well, we got to have a roll call first, so let's go ahead and have a roll call.
Trustee Debbie Anthony,
Here.
Trustee Charles Calhoun, Trustee Tammy Cross,
Here.
Trustee Brandon Johnson, Trustee Janet Reed,
Present.
Vice Chairman Danny Scher. Here. Chairman Jim Thorpe.
Here. Okay, number one is discuss and consider voting to take action or take no action regarding the letter from the city manager to Durant, of Durant to the Durant Tourism Economic Development Authority dated September 16th, 2020, concerning the city of Durant's relationship to the DTEDA, specifically the stated intention of the city of Durant to cease furnishing city personnel for administrative service to the DTEDA. Have any discussion on that? Any discussion?
I think that's why our attorney is here, isn't it?
Yes.
I will be glad to tell you what my thoughts are on it, and you
Okay.
all can have to decide what you want to do. I'm used to saying that.
Okay.
It's a habit in my job.
Yes.
Of course, as you all know, I'm kind of new to the game, and I've been reading along all the various documents that formed the trust, the ordinance, the initiative that was passed by the voters, citizens of Durant many months ago now. But on this specific question, what I reviewed, and I think what you need to think about, your bylaws that you have the authority to enact back at the initiation of this board or this body, provided that in Article 3 that the secretary of this trust of the trustees would be the city clerk of the city of Durant. And Article 4 similarly said that under the heading of treasurer, that the city treasurer of the city of Durant will serve as the treasurer of the trustees. I think you all had a copy. So you could examine the copy of the memorandum of letter from Mr. Dean, city manager of Durant, to Mr. Thorpe, chairman of this body, dated September 16, 2020, wherein Mr. Dean informed the board via Mr. Thorpe that it was the intention of the city of Durant to cease providing personnel to perform administrative functions effective November 1st, 2020. I won't read that verbatim because you all, I think, have seen it. And I read Mr. Dean's letter. I read the letter or memorandum that Mr. Markham, the city attorney, provided for Mr. Dean's benefit, upon which he based his decision and notice to you. And I agree with the law that Mr. Markham states. I'll say it another way. I don't have anything contrary to the representations of law that Mr. Markham made to Mr. Dean, upon which Mr. Dean apparently made his decision to take the action he felt like he needed to take. I then looked at the law and Title 11 of the Oklahoma statutes and the other related municipal law, and it's clear that Mr. Dean, as city manager of the city of Durant, under the type of government that the city of Durant's organized under, has absolute authority to supervise the city officers and employees. And so I believe Mr. Dean has the authority that he's exercising in this letter to you. So I believe what this board must do is to consider the manner in which you want to select a trustee, or I'm sorry, a secretary for the trustees and a treasurer for the trustees, because the city is going to cease functioning or cease furnishing those city employees as of November 1st. In the trust indenture itself, so let me back up just a step. So what that's going to envision, or what I envision would have to happen, is once the board selects, pardon me, a trustee or a secretary and a treasurer, as part of that, the board will need to develop a process to select those offices or those people to assist the board in a manner of retaining them, or how they're selected, for instance, on a term or indefinitely, or those kind of things. The trust indenture itself, excuse me, specifically, I don't know if my pages are numbered like everybody else, because the copy I have has been copied a few times, but it appears in Article Roman numeral 7 of the trust indenture, labeled the trustees, and in particular, numerical paragraph 3 says that the trustees shall select a person who shall serve as secretary of the trustees, and the trustees may select one or more assistant secretaries of the trustees, all of whom may or may not be trustees of the authority. And then it goes on and gives the duties of the secretary that you can read there. And then right under that, in number 4, it says the trustees shall select the person who shall serve as treasurer of the trustees, and the trustees may select one or more assistant treasurers of the trustees, all of whom may or may not be authorities of the trustee, or trustees of the authority, I'm sorry. And then there's another provision that could have relevance under that regarding your ability to appoint a general manager and executive director. So I think the first thing you have to do is try to discuss, when you're ready to discuss, and to develop a process for appointment of these positions. As I just pointed out, the board members can serve those functions or not. And it's not like it has to be done today necessarily, but November 1 will be on you before you know it. So certainly the process needs to start immediately, giving that thought. And of course, as lawyers do, when somebody asks us a question, it kind of starts my mind to start thinking about other things. And so there is a requirement in Oklahoma law, and this is maybe get the cart before the horse a little bit, but it's also something I think needs to be thought about. The statutes regarding public trusts require the public trust, a body like this, to make, and I think the trust indenture even speaks to this first item, annual reports, financial reports to the city of Durant as beneficiary. And it goes further than that. State law requires there to be an audit done of the body at least annually. I believe, I didn't read that statute again this morning, but I think it says within, it's at least to be undertaken within 30 days at the close of the fiscal year. And then it's to be provided to not only the beneficiary, which is the city of Durant, but the board as well as the state auditor and inspector. There is a way you can opt out of some of that. But your assets, as I understand it, are over $50,000. So I don't know that you could opt out of that, but I don't know if those reports are being made, but it caused me to begin thinking about that because when I thought about a treasurer, and keeping up with financial records and documents. And the trust, and I didn't go into all the detail, but the trust indenture outlines the duties of other duties where the financial reports are to be kept and so forth. So that would be my general comments to you. And so maybe the first thing logically would be to determine, is anyone on the board willing and interested in assuming those functions? And if so, or the board, is this board willing to consider authorizing those people to do that by resolution? And then no matter what manner of selection you follow, your bylaws will have to be amended, and that can be done by just an affirmative vote of the majority of the trustees seated at the time of the vote. So if you all have questions, I can answer them, but otherwise I think that's something you'll have to discuss.
I
Is
had
the-
several.
Is the very first thing, I'm sorry, Danny,
No, go ahead.
is the very first thing then that we need to do is amend the bylaws?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to determine, you probably have to determine a process on selection, because I believe the city has the authority. I mean, you can't require the city of Durant to form the functions. I don't know what all the discussion was, and I obviously wasn't around and involved in that. I don't know if any of you were when all that at its genesis, when this bylaw was enacted. But I reviewed the legal authority cited by the city attorney that Mr. Dean based his letter on, and it's clear to me that the law requires the trust has to be recognized and function as a separate independent body from the city of Durant. And I suppose city of Durant could continue to do it, but that they've made the choice that it's in their interest, they should not. And I don't believe that this board obviously has the authority to make them continue to perform those functions if they don't choose to do so any longer. But the bylaw would have to be amended to say it could be broad to allow, as I said earlier, the appointments to be made for these positions on an annual basis or at the pleasure of the board until the board discharges somebody, or there'll be various ways to do that. And it could be left open. It could be done either by people appointed from the board, or if no one was appointed from the board, then a mechanism to hire, to contract with someone to perform those services outside the board.
I believe that past minutes will reflect that this authority has offered to compensate the city for those things. And we were told that that could not be done. Is that correct?
I don't know about that aspect of it because I didn't look at that, but the point is the city's not an indentured servant to this board. And I don't mean that the way it sounds, but I just simply think the law does not give this board the authority to require or bind, or whatever the word is, the city to furnish in these functions. I think so. If the city chooses not to do so, I think that's the choice the city can make.
Would
So-
the city,
No, we'd probably try to compensate for that. If the city says, no, we don't want your money for, helping us with the meeting, they don't have to.
I don't believe so. I don't think they have to continue performing the functions that they've been performing.
Jim, I
I-
think Tammy was talking.
well, I was just going to say, would the city consider it if we compensated them?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's something that could be discussed with the city, but I don't know any of that history. But I guess that'd be possible to renew an offer to them to do so.
I
So-
wasn't here around when this was set up. Why was this set up this way, though? I mean, we're all in it together. I mean, if we increase tourism, we increase sales tax collections for the city in all areas. I mean, I don't understand why. I mean, we ought to work together on this.
And that's a question that, I answer legal questions. I don't make decisions of business and policy and other things like that. Those are functions that people that are in all these various positions have the authority to make those decisions. I can just tell you what I believe legally can be done. And I don't find it. I looked at Mr. Markham's research and I independently tried to research and I don't see anything to the contrary. And I just simply think that the spirit of it, I believe, or the theory is that, and I believe legally, Mr. Markham's dead on, the city of Durant is the beneficiary of the trust. And that the function of a beneficiary, and even outside the public trust setting, I mean, even in other trust matters, state law is clear that the trust clearly operates as a separate legal entity. It's a separate recognized legal entity from the beneficiary.
What is the difference between this one and our airport and our
DI.
water system? I mean,
Mr. Dean, you want to?
Difference is the trustees of those other entities that you mentioned are city council members. They also have separate meetings. That's why all the meetings that we have are separate. You enter one meeting, you end that meeting, or you recess that meeting and go to the other meeting, right? That's why they're different. So, I mean, this one is a totally separate, the way it was set up is totally separate, right? So,
I mean, because the members on the other boards are all council members, that's the main distinction, you think?
I don't think that's the main distinction, but they do operate together, whereas the tourism authority operates separately. The city council has ultimate responsibility for how that money is spent in certain occasions in those other authorities. In the tourism authority, the city council has no vote at all in how that money is spent. So there is a direct connection financially between those other entities, not necessarily with this entity, right? Like the airport, for example, all the funds that come in for the airport grant-wise federal, right? Over the last 20 years, we've received almost $20 million in grant funds federal. The city actually receives those funds. Then those funds get used on the airport. It gets transferred to the airport. It doesn't happen that way here, if that makes sense why they're different.
How many members of the council serve on those particular
Five.
authorities? The airport and the
Five.
utility?
5. They're 5-member boards. The council serves as those authority members.
Okay.
I have a question on those other boards. They don't have to be the council members, do they? There's nothing.
No, sir, they do not. And in several cities that I know of, they do not. They typically hold a number of council members, not necessarily full council. A lot of times they do hold, council does hold a majority though.
It just seems redundant for us to have to go out and, I mean, when, again, the whole idea is to improve the city. It just seems redundant for us to have to hire somebody on the outside
Yes, sir.
to do this.
Yes, sir. The city performs those functions at no cost to this entity. The other entities do provide funds to the city that recoup, the city does recoup their fund, their time and labor for doing those services for the other entities. Whereas this entity, again, is totally separate and doesn't provide anything to the city money-wise that we get paid directly for our services. So,
Why was, y'all were there, why was this set up this way? Because you didn't want the tax money being spent on, you wanted control over.
The
How we
city
spend the money?
attorney is actually the one that did the bylaws and the trust. there was a committee that met with the trust to form that, but the city attorney is actually the one, and minutes will reflect this of the meeting. So
So what you're saying, it was wrote up, the city attorney looked at it and redid it some, and that's how it was set up. So the city
Yes.
attorney did have the
The
final,
attorney is the one that wrote this?
he didn't write it, did he? It was already,
it was a
And
committee that
rough
put it
draft?
together. There were a committee of city council members, the city manager at that time, and several others that met to come up with what the suggestions for the trust was. But the city attorney was the one that presented those. And I think minutes will reflect that if you will go back and look.
Who was the city attorney at that time?
I believe it was Mr. Markham.
and so he redid it, he reworded it some, or what did he do when he looked at the rough draft?
There again, the minutes will reflect it. And I can't verbatim say everything.
I think
because I
what
don't-
it amounts to is that we had a draft at the time that we wanted to work from. And the city manager was very involved in us getting this trust put together and then having it voted on by the people. And the city attorney had been called in by the city manager at that time. And this meeting that, I guess for lack of a better definition, it was a draft meeting that I think we had minutes to it, didn't we? And what actually happened was he took the draft that our trust had come up with as to the things that they wanted to try to accomplish and do. He took it and edited it, made some changes, put some things in, took some things out, and then presented it back to this same draft committee. And the draft committee then voted to send that to the city council, and the city council took it from there. That's how we got to where we are.
And if
Well,
I'm not mistaken, I think that did have to be approved through the city council before it could be put on the ballot. That
That's
and your
correct.
ordinance.
Yeah, anything that goes on the ballot from the city has to be approved by council, by
Okay.
ordinance, so.
Is there any way that you would reconsider, or, would you reconsider, because we want to work with the city, that you'd reconsider if we paid for the services that you're rendering now, even for the city treasurer and the city clerk? We don't mind, and, we would pay you for those services. If it had been brought up before, we would already been paying, but we want to work with the city of Durant.
If
We're
that's
here,
legal.
we're here to bring the economy up and bring more sales tax in this thing. And we're very serious about that. And we're working on that even now. But we want to bring more sales tax money and money into your coffers to do that.
Right.
And if we possibly could, I'd like to be able to, whatever you came up with, that was just reasonable.
Okay.
I don't see any problem with us doing that, but I sure would like you to reconsider this,
Okay.
if you would.
If your attorney thinks it's legal for you to do that, because he made the comment a while ago that he didn't know if it was or
Yeah.
not. So
Well,
I'm okay with entertaining that, Mr. Thorpe.
I'm not in a position to tell you can do it or not, because that wasn't on the agenda today and it wasn't on my radar.
Okay.
My suggestion would be, is that that this board perhaps take no action on the action today in order to be reconsidered on I guess you've got the regular meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And with everybody's okay with that, I would speak to the city attorney about that, so we come to a consensus about process and legality. Does that seem reasonable, Mr. Dean?
Yes, sir.
So I guess talking to the attorney, it would be good. I would, we're talking about November's coming up fast. And I like to have, if we could work this thing out until January the 1st, if we can just, there's no reason it has to be done exactly right now. And I'd like to have it to where we had a little bit more time to see if we can work it out. We're all in this together. We're trying to do this, and this COVID virus has made everybody tense, even in my family and everywhere else. I mean, it's did a job on everyone, cost everybody a lot of stuff. And I just want to get together and be fair with the city and try to work this thing out is what I want to do, because, all we're trying to do is help the city bring in more money. But,
Which in turn
I know.
helps, which in turn helps all the businesses too. I mean, it helps everybody.
I definitely feel that way as
Yeah.
well. And I don't think, and I can't speak for anyone except myself, but I certainly have no problem compensating the city for time that they put into this. And I know it is time consuming. I do.
I wish we had brought it up sooner. I wish we had brought it up at the start.
has
Go ahead,
been-
Charles, what were you gonna say?
It has been brought up, but that's why I was the one that said the legality. Somebody said that it was not legal for us to do that. And if it is, I think that that's the best scenario for it. May I ask a legal question at this time? Is it legal for a trust to even create a bank account? That
Yes.
would be moving a sizable amount of money.
It is. I think your bylaws of the trust indenture give you the authority to maintain your own accounts, make your own contracts. I do believe it is, yeah. And I
Okay,
think you'd have in theory, if something wasn't worked out with the city and you were put in a position where someone from this board had to agree to serve these functions or go outside the board, I think you have the authority to contract for that and pay reasonable wages for that. I don't know. I don't believe that the board can be compensated for doing those functions like a salary or a board member. I think it falls under the general category, like if you had extraordinary expenses or something, you could recoup. But if you had to go outside and contract with a third party, let's say, to do that, then I think you could contract with that employee and compensate them.
So what do we need to do? Do we need to have you to represent us with the city manager and the city attorney to see if we could go ahead and work this out as far as compensation? And give us a little time, maybe to January 1st to do that? Would we need to go through you and you talk to them? What do we need to do on that?
What my suggestion would be is if it's the pleasure of the board that you enact a resolution authorizing the board attorney to discuss the matter with the city manager and the city attorney to see if a proposal could be arrived at to bring back to you to compensate the city of Durant for these services. And then just continue consideration of this matter to your next meeting. I don't know if we can accomplish that, but then I can call Mr. Markham today or tomorrow.
does that need to be in a form of a motion or a resolution? I
Well,
think was
it's
the
a
term you
motion. I
used.
mean,
Okay,
yeah, I
we
just
could
make
do
a
that.
motion and have it where it's duly noted on your agenda what you did on it. That way there's no question of the action you're taking.
Charles?
Just so we don't get the cart before the horse, is there any reason other than compensation that this comes up at this time? I mean, this came out of the clear blue there. I guess I asked that to the city manager. No, sir. So it's just compensation?
I love talking through these masks.
Compensation is not the only consideration for me. The consideration was for the legal aspect of the authority of the tourism authority to actually assign additional duties and tasks to city employees to where they did not have the authority. And that's what my letter simply states, basically, is that's why we were going to end that relationship, because you acted outside of your authority. So,
Well,
but if we come to some agreement to where our employees are compensated for what they're doing, it makes better sense to the city. Because right now, the treasurer is dedicating a significant amount of time to do, and the finance department to do the checks, to do everything that occurs financially for the authority. The city clerk historically has served at these meetings. She's done minutes. She has spent a lot of time. We have an IT guy sitting here right now, right? We also provide all the technology that the authority uses. There's a lot of things involved when you say this is what you're going to do as an authority that affects the employees of the city, their time and what they can dedicate to the things that they're already supposed to be doing. So that was my concern.
It's not anything but money that is the problem, and that's what
It's time and efficiency for the city that they're not being compensated for. Yes, sir. I guess.
Well, they're
you-
not
the
not
money.
their job.
And I will
Ms.
totally
Cross had a
support.
comment. I didn't hear what she said. I don't know if you heard.
Okay,
Well, I understand, as an employer, for us, if you have someone working for you and then they go do somebody else, a job for someone else, it takes away from the city. If the city employee so I think we should compensate them if we can legally, because I think we all want to work together for sure. So I understand, from the standpoint of the time that it takes them to work for the authority, it's taken away from their regular job, which is not really fair to the city. So I understand that. And I think we can figure out a way to work together.
And
and I
could I
totally,
ask you a question
Sure.
too? If we do work this out, and I thank you for asking the questions, I wish we had taken care of this at first. Is there any way that we could go back to January the 1st of this year if he decides to let us compensate the city? Is there any way we can back this up to January the 1st and pay him from January the 1st up to now?
I would have reservations about that. I don't know
Okay.
the answer to that. My initial feeling would be no,
Okay,
but I'd certainly willing to look at that.
sure.
I will totally agree with Mr. Dean. It is very time consuming, so I certainly.
Mr. Dean,
agree
can I
with
ask you a
that.
question?
Yes,
Does
sir.
the city treasurer provide those financial report and
Yes,
audit
sir.
functions? Now, I assume they did.
Yes, sir.
So that's something over and above the meetings. I honestly didn't realize that till I got started preparing for the meeting that financial reports, and you all have worked with this longer than me, but I thought surely those are getting done, and those aren't
Yes,
done.
sir, they
Those
are.
aren't done in 5 minutes either,
No,
so.
sir, they're not. Yeah.
And she does an excellent job with that.
Well, and just, as my wife said, it's what lawyers are for, is to, keep making things confusing. But the other thought that came to my mind was, and I'm just speaking out loud I think it's all things we need to be considered. In theory, if you go outside and you get a third party, you got a city treasurer and you've got people that are already covered by error and omissions policies and they're bonded, and the cost can kind of become exponential if you go outside, because you've got to compensate somebody, and then you may have to get them a bond, and you have, just it just keeps opening up issues. And so I think it would be a good thing if it could be worked out.
I
Yeah,
agree.
because
I do too, yeah.
yeah, because if you go outside, they got to know something about the city government and all that. I mean, it's crazy out there. But like I said, I wish we'd brought it up earlier. There was no intent on us doing this and getting it free.
Right.
If we'd have thought about this earlier, we'd have took care of you then, but we don't have any problem now. And we sure like to reconsider if we could do that to our attorney like that.
Okay.
But
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate you coming this morning.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have some questions for the city manager?
I mean, the auditing thing, I don't know if we've ever been auditing or if that has been included.
Yes, sir. It's been included. It's been included in the city audit. Yes, sir.
It's just kind of thrown in with the city. Well, that costs more work.
Yes, sir, it does.
More, yes.
Yes, sir. More work for everybody, the auditors, our staff. Yes, sir.
And I do know,
Have we
having
not been
served on
paying
some,
for-
oh,
Have
I'm
have we
sorry.
not been paying for the audit? I was on
I am not 100% sure whether you've paid for the actual audit or not.
I was under the
I know that-
impression we were.
I know
paying
our
for the
staff,
audit.
our staff does significant amount of work to prepare for the audit. So,
I think, and if we'll look back on the minutes, I'm sorry, in the treasury report, that there was an amount that was taken out for that.
For the
I'm
audit.
not for
That's
sure.
possible.
But there again, it was for the audit itself. And I
That's
do
correct.
know, serving on the other boards that I have served on, they do compensate for that. The DIA and some of those other
Right.
boards do as well.
Yes,
And so I I definitely think the city should be compensated.
Well, I do too, yes.
Thank you all.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
One more question on November is the month, I believe, Mr. Dean, that we have to establish where meetings will take place to turn into the Attorney General. Is that correct?
It has to be done before the end of December, so I'll probably do it in November.
Okay, okay.
So what we need to get back down to is we have to get somebody to make, if you want this, we need to have somebody make a motion to have our board attorney to discuss the matter with the city manager and the city attorney. I guess considering this matter, go ahead,
Before
Charles.
we make a motion and vote on it, is this room is available for all city bodies, isn't it? If it's scheduled appropriately.
Yes, sir, the room is.
So if our schedule, which is set up for the second Wednesday every month.
At 3 o'clock.
If that doesn't interfere with something else that's using the room that's scheduled, then I would think that this trust, which is a function of some sort, I don't know whether we need to get into calculus to figure out what order of function it is, but it's a function of the city of Durant. And so we should, I think, be able to use this room. As long as we're not bothering some other function.
Are you making this question for our attorney?
I think Mr. Dean just answered that. He said it was available.
Yeah, I think it's available. I don't think you're you're an independent body. And that's kind of that's really the underlying tone and, of the city's letter to the board, is trying to make sure that that's established, that you are acting independently. The city is a beneficiary of your function. That's the best way I could say that.
I might ask a question there. For instance, the athletic complex is a trust just like ours, and it's not made up of just city council people. There are some city council on it. We also have a city council person on it. I fail to see the difference between the two, but then I don't have enough knowledge to know the difference.
Okay.
There's really no difference, right? But DCFA is one of those other authorities that does compensate the city for their time.
For using the room,
No, sir. No, sir.
that was the question I had.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I will gladly make the motion to give our attorney, Mr. Morrison, the authority to negotiate with the city manager and the city attorney to move this thing forward to see if we can get a compensation rate put together.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion by Janet. Did you second it?
I did.
And Charles seconded it. Have any more discussion about that? Okay, do you have a roll call?
Trustee Debbie Anthony,
Yes.
trustee Charles Calhoun,
Yes.
trustee Tammy Cross,
Yes.
trustee Janet Reed,
Yes.
vice chairman Danny Sher,
Yes,
chairman Jim Thorpe.
Yes. Number 2, discuss and consider taking action regarding fee schedule for open records request. This is starting right now. This is not in the past. We're talking about now. And you have this at the city has, all of y'all have this. And so we're looking at if somebody makes a request for us from this day forward, do we want to go along with this? Do we want to charge them? What do you want to do?
Well, I might ask our attorney, what can we do?
I think you have the authority to establish a fee schedule. You have the authority to establish a fee schedule to comply with the open records request. in the same manner as the city of Durant or otherwise, as long as it's reasonable. That's what the act requires. And I wasn't aware that I was going to speak to that, so I'd have to do a little more research if we're going to get much into that. But short answer is I think you have the authority to enact a fee schedule similar to the city of Durant or otherwise, as long as it's reasonable.
I would think we'd have to include this in the compensation to the city. I mean, someone's got to take care of it when you get that request. And that ought to be, if we can work something out with the city, that ought to be part of it. And
Right
just
now-
and go with what the city wants to charge.
Right now, what we do now is we've contracted with the Chamber of Commerce, and so they have all the records where they send it out.
The Chamber of Commerce does, okay.
And they send out the records too.
And Jennifer Taylor is that contact.
Okay. And we've not been charging for that in the past?
We just recently got the first request. This was the first time that we
Okay.
had gotten any requests.
We don't get very much requests for anything. This is the first time in 3 years, which, you're not talking about much, but it just depends on if y'all want to charge them or not.
Well, you've got a technicality of how we're gonna receive the money. And what do we do with it? If,
That's another question.
Does your authority maintain a separate financial account now? Or is it just all,
That's-
the only account I'm aware of is the one.
I'm
that
gonna let the
tax money's
city
accumulated
speak to
in.
that.
Consolidated with the city's account.
Okay.
It's in a separate fund,
Yeah.
but it's in the same actual account.
I think that could be charged off, I think, to an account. Okay, if it were handled.
would that need to be part of our, whatever agreement our attorney is able to negotiate with the city?
I'll tell you, there's gonna be an issue there because the authority maintains the records. And if we're responsible for the request, we have no control over those records. And it's been an issue with the city. We've corrected what we have now, but in the past, it's been a city issue with the city, as Mr. Scherer knows, that if you don't have actual control of those records, it's almost impossible for you to
Yes.
meet those requirements of fulfilling that requirement. So my fear would be if the city's not maintaining those records, we would be liable for not making that request. At some, potentially, not saying it would happen, but potentially because of the history of the city and what's happened in the past, I would be concerned about that.
That would be more records for the city to put in there. Considering we hardly ever get anything, I mean, you might be looking at $5 a year, and that's just extra work for the city treasurer. I don't know. I'm not really for it or against it, really, truly. I'm not excited about it. It's up to y'all. If
But
somebody wants,
it's something you could always revisit once you get the business. The elephant in the room today is this issue with the city. It needs to be hopefully rectified so everybody can work together. And if that can happen, this is not a make or break issue today,
No.
the way I see it. But that's
So-
up to you to decide.
The only problem is, Mr. Morrison, is there has been a request for
Yeah.
these. And quite honestly, I don't know what to do. And the request came directly to me.
Okay. Well, this body is this body is subject to the Open Meeting Act and the Open Records Act, just like any other
Yes.
body, and you have to produce the records that are requested.
exactly.
And it is, again, I think you have the authority to adopt a fee schedule like this. And Mr. Calhoun's point's well taken. If you do that, you'll have to, as part and parcel of that, create a mechanism to collect those funds and to account for those funds, just like everything else. And then you get into the thought of, is the cost benefit thing at that point, in that is the fees collected going to outweigh the cost of all the administration you're setting up to administer it? And I don't know the answer to that.
I really, and this is my personal opinion, I really think that to do this, or what it's bringing in, it's menial. And for us to do this, it's just a little bit of more bookwork to take care of. But it's up to y'all. If somebody wants to make a motion to take action on this or to table it, depends on what y'all want to do.
I would say table it, and the minutes have to be approved from that last meeting anyway until they're ready to go. And they have not been approved until we meet in October. So we could actually table this until that time, and the decision can be rendered at that time.
It may be a matter of technicality, but I always like to use the term just no action taken as opposed to just tabling something, because it
Okay.
kind of, and I don't know how the city does it, but it can be kind of confusing to the public if they're reading agendas and things. And so I generally would just, if no action is going to be taken, it was discussed in just a minute's note, no action was taken.
Any more discussion? Anyone want to make a motion on this?
Make the motion, we take no action.
Okay, we
I'll
got-
say,
Okay, we got Danny making a motion on no action taken, and we have Tammy seconding it. Have any more discussion? Okay, roll call.
Trustee Debbie Anthony,
Yes.
trustee Charles Calhoun,
Yes.
trustee Tammy Cross,
You came across?
yes,
trustee Janet Reed,
Yes.
vice chairman Danny Sher,
Yes.
chairman Jim Thorpe.
Yes. Okay, we need a motion. It's time to adjourn. I have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we got Janet and we have Tammy seconded.
Yes.
Okay, Tammy Cross seconded. Okay, we have a roll call.
Trustee Debbie Anthony,
Yes.
trustee Charles Calhoun,
Yes.
trustee Tammy Cross,
yes.
trustee Janet Reed,
Yes.
vice chairman Danny Sher,
Yes.
chairman Jim Thorpe.
Yes. Need to turn off your microphones.
Remote.